Welcome to WorkSpan TV. I'm Tanya Adamski, Research Analyst for WorldatWork. Today we'll be discussing return on investment and teleworking employees. What are some ways that an organization might be able to quantify their return on investment when it comes to telework?
Well, Tanya, approximately 50% of organizations right now are actually offering telework to some of their employees. However, only 7% are actually measuring any quantifiable way in terms of how telework is giving a return to their organization. So one of those ways would be in terms of attraction and retention. And what you may want to take a look at is the fact that when you use telework, you can open up the pool of candidates to your organization. You may be able to offer teleworking to a population that may be disabled, where they'd be able to work within their home. Also, you'd be able to open up to a national or even a global basis instead of just looking locally. And that would help you fill positions faster than what you normally would be able to do. So that's one of the ways within attraction and retention. Another way is in terms of absenteeism. You would want to make sure that you're measuring your absenteeism once you implement telework to see if there is a correlation there. You would also perhaps take a look at phased return from leave, where you're offering an opportunity for employees to come back and ease back into full-time by perhaps teleworking on a part-time basis as they come back to full-time. Reducing turnover is another way that you can quantify telework within your organization. There has actually been studies that show a direct correlation between increased flexibility in an organization and voluntary turnover being at a very low rate. Also, there's been a statistically significant correlation between those that have higher engagement and satisfaction within their employee base when they offer this form of flexibility. So you definitely want to make sure the next time that you offer an employee satisfaction survey to ask those questions and be able to measure those results.
I can see that nearly 50% of organizations include telework as part of their business continuity plan. Can you share with us some ways that an organization might measure a return on investment when it comes to business continuity?
Sure, Tanya. Most of the time, organizations think of business continuity in terms of severe crisis to their organization. But there are other instances that organizations should really take into consideration, such as if there is a blizzard where employees are unable to make it into the office, or a hurricane that also closes down businesses, or even the flu season that happens every year that sometimes can be so severe that many employees are unable to make it to work. So these are the types of things that you want to consider, including a telework portion within your business continuity. Here are some statistics that I think that organizations should really think about. The average loss of per hour of downtime within organizations is $78,000. And the average number of hours in a year that organizations could be down because of a severe crisis are 38 hours. Now, if you add those together, that's almost $3 million a year. So also, there is a 43% of companies that when they are hit by a severe crisis, they're never able to reopen their doors, which is just another reason that organizations really need to try to consider telework to keep some of their employees working during a downtime of a severe crisis. There's even a ripple effect of additional 29% of organizations that have to close their doors within 2 years when there is a severe crisis that occurs with the first organization. So these are just really some things that you want to take into consideration, including a telework portion within your business continuity plan. Certainly the numbers play out, and organizations would want to take really a close look at that. One thing I will say, though, is that if you do not have a telework program in place and actually up and running when the crisis occurs, then the telework program is probably not going to do as much good for that organization. So really making sure that the telework program is up and working even prior to something happening would be beneficial.
In other words, don't plan your telework program during a crisis.
Exactly.
Plan before. I know measuring the productivity of workers can be a real challenge for many organizations. What are some of your recommendations when it comes to that?
In some organizations, such as manufacturing, it's really relatively easy to measure productivity. You take the number of hours that an employee works and you times it by the number of widgets that they actually made. In a knowledge worker, it becomes much more challenging, and businesses are still struggling with trying to figure out how to measure that productivity of the knowledge worker. And by the way, most of the teleworking today is done by knowledge workers. So what they really want to take a look at is what is it that they're measuring even when they're in the office. Usually there is some form of performance plan and some type of planning that goes on between the employee and their manager. So what really needs to happen is that they need to sit down, the teleworker and the manager, and think about that performance plan and put it down in writing, and then incrementally divide it up so that they can actually sit down on an incremental basis and see if they are meeting their goals, and if there are any obstacles in front of those goals that they would be able to eliminate. Just because they're teleworking doesn't mean that they're not being productive. A lot of managers and a lot of organizations struggle with being able to understand how they can measure that productivity, and they're fearful because they cannot see the employee that they're not being able to have a productive employee, which usually in most cases is not the case. In fact, we've seen some studies that are showing that there's an increase in productivity in those employees that do telework. So certainly making sure that there is some type of performance plan in place and that they're able to incrementally sit down with the manager, talking about what those goals are and meeting with them often so that there is a conversation that goes on between the employee and the manager to validate that performance plan.
So regularly checking in with employees can help managers gauge how much productivity is actually being accomplished.
Not only that, regularly checking in with their employees makes a manager a leader.
Rose, what are some things that organizations need to consider when it comes to real estate and the teleworking employee?
Well, real estate can really be a substantial cost savings to organizations if they're truly thinking of making telework a big aspect within their organization. We know of one instance, Sun Microsystems, who are now a part of Oracle, over the course of 6 years, saved over $400 million in terms of their overhead costs, electricity and actual physical space, by offering up a teleworking program where employees were working in various areas, either in other offices, in their homes, or traveling and doing business that way. So there can be a substantial savings within the real estate area. What you should really do is get together with your facilities department and really do a good cost analysis of what's going to benefit the organization if you do implement some teleworking.
Thank you, Rose, for sharing these 4 areas of consideration when it comes to measuring your return on investment in teleworking employees. For WorkSpan TV, I'm Tanya Adamski.